let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to try and talk a little bit about the builder pattern and using it with some unit tests. It sounds like sound is going through. That's always good. See, I don't have chatty going. I told it to start. Oh, there it is. Just post some more stuff telling people to show up. And there we go. Alright. So, a few years ago, 2018, I wrote an article about using the builder pattern for your test data, which you could go read if you wish. I'll throw a link to it in the chat. You can grab later. Probably you're watching this on YouTube, and if I think about it, I'll try and put it in the notes from YouTube as well, but I usually don't remember to, so apologies in advance. Basically, if you search in Google for Ardalis builder tests, it'll show up. Then I created a coding exercise that's on GitHub, and so that's here. And if you want to follow along with this, you're welcome to go and grab a copy of this and go through the instructions, which are in the README file here, which we'll look at in just a second. Now, I do have a couple things I want to change with this before I get started, and I should probably link it to my Kata Catalog. Oh, there it is. Look at that. So I have a Kata Catalog, or Catalog, if you will, of various code katas, of which this is one. And so if you want to find other ones, you can go check them out here at this other URL. Today, I want to fix up this sample a little bit before I actually go through and try and do the kata itself. So to that end, I've already cloned it down here, and I seem to be on the main branch, which is perfect. And what I want to do initially is just change some real trivial things with how the naming convention is used here. So within this base thing, I want this to actually be with ID, not just ID, because that's a pretty standard thing for how these work, what the interface or API is. And I'm going to go ahead and move this up also and just make it so build is at the bottom, because I think I prefer that. And that should be all I need to do. So looking here, nothing here needs to change. That now says with ID. So that all looks good. Let me commit this and then we'll start actually working through it real quick. So what do we do? Rename ID to with ID. Commit. Push. Alright, now I can't fork this thing, but I might already have an attempts thing on my repo. I like to store, when I try and do a kata, I like to store it somewhere so I can refer back to it later. So if we go look at my repositories, and that's my builder test sample that we're just looking at. Do I have like a builder attempts? No, not really. I think I might have had some that were branches. Yeah, there's some branches I made, but I don't really want to keep doing that because that's not really a great way to do it. So let's create another repo for this, and we'll just do our work over there. So we're going to create a new repository. We're going to call it builder test kata attempts, and we'll make that public, and we'll say sure, give it a readme and a thing and a Visual Studio, and create, well, we'll say anybody can steal this if they want it, which is what MIT means, and we'll create it. Catalog. Haha, I didn't come up with that, Tony. Somebody else did. Alright, so then we're just going to branch this down to my GitHub folder. We'll say git clone into attempts. There it is. And we'll go into builder test kata attempts, and we'll just create a folder for this, which we'll just give today's date. So we'll cheat and do that over here, because I want to move some files there anyway. So 2021-06-11, that works. And builder test sample, source, copy that, and we'll paste it into attempts under that date. Alright, now if we go to that date, if I can type, and go there and go there, really? Oh, I didn't get the solution file. That's okay. We'll do that. Thank you for the follow, Meta Info. Hey, Faseni, how's it going? Zovek. Hello, hello. Alright, this works. Now you're going to want me to save that solution file somewhere. I'll just put it in the root of that 2021 folder, if you'll let me. Come on. I should do this in VS Code, it'd be faster. I know you want to save this thing. Or am I looking at the wrong one? Well, let's see. Properties. There we go. That's what you're waiting for. Alright, it's just being slow. There we go. Now you want to save the solution in... yeah, that's probably fine. You can just save it in... Well, let's save it in... We'll save it where it says to because I don't want to break it. Alright, there we go. And then we're going to commit all the things and say initial version, commit all. Yeah. And we're good. So then we can push that out. And we have a version of it. Alright, so now I just want to make sure that all this stuff is working well. Builder test kata attempts, builder test sample, that's the right one. Where's the other one? This one. This one can go away. Okay, so let's go find the instructions. Back here. So this is my folder I just created. Yet another repository, and now it's got today's date. And I would like to be able to go in here and see for my tests. I'm going to try and put them all in this one folder, even though that's not ideal. I want to be able to see it in Git History here and be able to step through it and show you, what this looks like. So right now there's not much here because there's only one of these, but this Git History tool is really nice to be able to see how something evolves over time. And you can use it, basically you can only look at one file at a time, but it's still nice to kind of view the history of a given file. Alright, so don't need that anymore. Instructions. So fork or clone the repo, I did that. You should be able to run the test using xunit or whatever. Run the test, the included test pass, it does. Open the order service CS, read through the to-do comments. Each one is a thing you must do. Write a test in the order service place order class. For each new item, be sure to use a builder to create the order and its associated customer and address. Verify the test fails when you first run it, since you haven't yet implemented the code that will make it pass, because, we're doing TDD. Then add the code. Once you see the test pass and everything else still passes, remove the to-do comment, commit your code, and then you could also, refactor and commit and stuff like that. We can use this to-do list if we want in Visual Studio. And then this talks about the different builder patterns, which we're going to talk about. C#.net. Hi, how's it going? So that's the instructions. It's pretty straightforward. I made this kata a few years ago just as a way to kind of practice or test out how to use the builder. And since I have it, I'm going to go ahead and turn on live unit testing because it's handy for doing katas. So what live unit testing does, if you haven't seen it, and it's available in certain versions of Visual Studio, the expensive versions, is it gives you these little green check marks. And if you break stuff, for example, if I comment this out, it will break it. You'll see that they turn red. Now I didn't have to save the file, I didn't have to run the test, I didn't have to go to Test Explorer. It just showed me immediately that broke things, and this shows that they pass. Now things that are not tested, if we go look at our service over here, will show with these blue dashes to indicate that they're covered by 0 tests. Otherwise these will show that they are covered by a test. Alright, so we're going to put our tests over here on the right and the other stuff on the left. We'll bump this up to 100% so that folks watching the recording later can hopefully view it, because otherwise people whine that they can't see it on their phone, because that's exactly how you want to watch code. But anyway, here we are. So somebody wants me to buy followers and become famous. Yeah, I don't think so. Open. Now you're forcing me to figure out how to ban you. And boom. See ya. Alright. Now we got what, an hour left. Alright. And Ficeni says, do you have a plugin installed for that Git History button? Yes, I do have a Chrome plugin, but you don't need to use one. Let's jump back to that for a second. So here we go. In here, for any given file that you want to look at, so like this solution file, this shows up if you have the plugin. If you don't have the plugin, you can just go do it yourself, because all the plugin does is give you that button and then it adds that, right? So if you notice, this is the same as the github.com address, except they replace .com with githistory.xyz. So if you go to any given GitHub URL, doesn't even have to be mine. We could go to, I don't know, let's duplicate this and go to github.com/Microsoft/.net. Let's say, apparently that's not a thing because I can't spell Microsoft. Right, and then we go to their, I don't know, source, program, whatever this is. If you replace .com with .githistory.xyz, it should show you the history, which is not terribly exciting here. They changed one line at one point. But that's how it works, and you can use the left and right arrow keys to move back and forth. So it's a nice little plugin, especially for teaching and learning. Okay, so let's go back to the code and let's get started. So validate order is the first method that gets called in this place order service. And so basically it does three things. It's Brainwashed is like, just know I was going to learn how to become famous. Well, sorry, buddy. You can go reach out to him directly. Validate the order, expedite the order if necessary, and then add the order to the customer history. All right. So the model for this, the classes are pretty simple. There's nothing to them. There's an order that has an ID, a customer, some amount, and whether or not it's expedited. There's a customer. They have a list of orders somewhere. It's order history, and their total purchases, and these are not DDD style entities by any stretch. And then there's this address. It just has a bunch of get set methods. Now the only thing that's at all interesting about these is that customer requires an ID, and that'll become important later on. But other than that, there's no business logic to speak of here. They don't have any encapsulation really. They're really pretty crappy as model types go. But that's not the point. The point is how to practice using the builder pattern. And so to do that, what we want to do is not have to go and create a whole bunch of object state inside of our test. So when we want to write a test that verifies, for instance, that when we place an order, its amount must be greater than 0, we don't want to have to create an order with a customer, with an address, with some items on it that has an amount that's so much. And that's the problem. All right. SurlyDev has an excellent question, which I should probably talk about, and that is, what is the builder pattern? You're probably already familiar with the builder pattern. Here's an example of how it's used. So it's used in the framework, inside the .NET Core framework, for things like configuration and for things like how you set up your web host. So if you look in just about any project, like this clean architecture project will do, and you look at your program.cs, you're going to see this create host builder. And create host builder basically says, do all these things, right? Configure the builder, use the default thing, use this, configure that, whatever. But when you're done, you call build, right? And build is what gives you a host. So if you see right here that you say, var host equals create host builder, pass in whatever stuff, do a bunch of things, right? That's all the things are down here. They're encapsulated, but they don't have to be. They could all be right here. And when you're done, call build, right? it's a creational pattern from the design patterns book, the Gang of Four. It's similar to a factory. A factory is designed to give you something as well, but if I wanted to make this with a factory, it would be a lot more work, because I would have to pass in, like, it would just be one method, and I have to pass in all the options that I could possibly want into that method. And there's a lot of options on how you can configure a host builder. So having to create one method with one parameter set or one parameter object that would have every possible option would be not a very good user experience, right? It would be a real pain to sort that out. So what you do with a builder is you kind of like have a default set of settings, and then you can tweak it and replace any of those by calling individual methods. So if we jump back to my code for this kata, and if you don't know what the builder is, then I definitely recommend you go through this kata. What we're doing here is we're creating an order with a builder, and then that lets us verify that this raises the correct exception when we go to place the order. And so maybe that's another thing I'll change. Maybe I need to make that use the action type that I've been using. I'll talk about that in a minute. So I could have done this, right? I could have said var order2 equals new order and order. Give me a namespace there, right? And then I could have said, well, it's got customer equals null and ID equals 123 and is expedited equals false and total amount equals 0, right, whatever, right? And then I could do assert this when I pass in order 2 and see if that works, and see that would work also. But then I have to repeat this on every single test, right? And so then later on, let's say I go change order, and I say, well, order, you know what, it needs an ID as a required parameter. Well, if I have 50 different tests for order, and they all knew it up, then every one of these is going to need to get changed, and I have 50 different errors now that I have to go fix. So one benefit is that it reduces how many places I have the new keyword in my code. So by using a builder, I only have one place that knows how to create this order, and it's in here, right? So when I go change how order is created, and I give it some required constructor argument, it only has to be set in order builder, not anywhere else in my tests. So that helps a lot. You may use these in your production code as well, right? If you have lots of different ways to create these entities, then absolutely they may make sense there. In your tests, though, they're particularly useful because you're always having to create these object structures with certain state, right, in order to run these tests. And you need to tweak one little thing to test it a different way. And so that's why I find them very useful here. Now, it's worth noting at this point, before I go much further, that if you are familiar with the builder pattern, that there is a tool out there called, I always want to say AutoFac, and that's not it, AutoFixture. And AutoFixture is basically a way to do the builder pattern inside of your code without having to write your own builder. Okay, yeah, exactly. New as glue, Surly Dev, you got it. So once you kind of graduate to where you know how this pattern works, and I would definitely recommend you do it yourself first, so you know how everything works under the covers. Then if you don't want to have to write those builders yourself, you can use a tool like AutoFixture, and what it does is it says you create this fixture type, and then you say, I want you to create a thing. And this create method is basically like the build method on your builder. But it can be used for any type, not just for your classes, right? So it'll give you an integer. It'll give you your class, right? This could be the order class. And it fills in all the properties with just random stuff. And a lot of times they are random stuff that you don't want, right? But it's a builder, so you can override it. So you could say, well, actually, I want the ID to be a number between 1 and 100 or whatever. You can even just fix it and say it needs to be number 2. And that's how this thing basically works. So it's a little more complicated because it's a tool that kind of elevates things to another level of abstraction, but it does have some real value in that you don't have to go and write every single builder yourself if that gets tedious. All right, so back to the exercise. I've got a builder already set, comes with the thing as a starting point. Let's go look at what that looks like. So in our test builders folder, we have an order builder, and the order builder basically has 3 methods that are interesting, right? It's got with ID, which we're using right now, to set the ID. And what it does is it just sets a local version of order ID to be whatever we pass in. And then return this, right? This is important for how the builder pattern works. The way you get that fluent interface with a builder so that you can chain together a whole bunch of different things is that each time you have one of those with methods, it should always return this. And so you're just returning back the same instance of the same thing, so you can keep chaining more methods on it. And so you can do something that looks like that, where you say dot with this, dot with that, dot build, and everything is working with that same instance at that point. The other one it has is with test values. This is just a pattern I like to use where I can have a default one. Some folks just do this by default. So like in the constructor, they'll set all the test values. So if you just create a builder and you say build, it gives you one that's got all the default values. And there's merit to that approach too. If you want to have different sets of certain types of values for your builder, you can create whatever of these you want, right? So you could have like with production values, with test values, with whatever, different types of things that make sense for you. And so in this case, all it's going to do is by default it'll use 100 as the total if you decide to call that method. Now the order on this will matter, right? If I call this method and then I override this with another method, obviously it'll change that number. So a lot of times you'll start with this and then change it. That's another reason why some folks would argue do that in a constructor, because then you can't get the order wrong, right? You'll always start with the defaults and then you can, adjust from there. So I may at some point just change this and use the constructor as the default, but for now let's leave it as is because we're burning through time as it is. Okay, so that's our current builder class. Everything's passing right now. We haven't really done anything yet. I don't think I even have anything to commit. So looking at this validate order, looking at the to-dos, I have my first to-do says validate that the order ID must be 0 because it's a new order. Right, and so I have a test over here, and my test says that hey, if I pass it 1, 2, 3, I expect to get an order. I need to switch this back so it's using my builder like that, and so I'm expecting this to be invalid. Now I could write another test for a happy path, which would probably be good. So let's do that, and we can say I expect that I do creates order given order with no ID. All right, now the problem with this is I'm going to probably have to keep changing this over and over again because we're going to keep adding more rules, but that's okay. So we're going to say with ID 0 to be explicit about it, and then expect that this thing works. And right now it doesn't. I'm not sure why. Order ID must be 0. Let's see. Let's run this test by hand and see what we get. I don't usually create a happy path test, so I'm going off the reservation here. But there's no reason why someone following this kata wouldn't do that, so it's good to see what would happen here. So in here, in there, creates order given order with no ID. That's what it's supposed to do. And instead, it got a... oh, I know why, because I've got this assertion. Right, duh. Let's just assert that order's not null. Assert... I'm just asserting the wrong thing. That not null order. How about now? All right, now it's happy. All right, so good. And we'll put this at the very top because that's our one test that I expect to keep having to come back to. Okay, so at this point we have added a test. Let's do a quick commit. Add happy path test commit. Okay, and order must be 0. I have that covered, so to-do goes away. All right, now to-do order amount must be greater than 0. So that's easy. Let's come over here. Let's copy paste program and say throws exception given order with 0 total amount. Okay, so with ID do that, and we'll go back to with test values and let me open that again, order builder. I need to set the total amount somewhere, so we'll do copy this one and we'll say with total amount decimal total amount. Alright, so there's that. And then the other thing I think I should do is probably set this ID explicitly here to be 0. That way I can expect that that's always true. It's what it would default to anyway, but there's no reason not to be explicit. Alright, so now if I call test values, it's going to set these two things. And when I say test values, I really mean it's like, valid values. So it's expecting that it has a 0, it's expecting that it has a non-zero amount, and we'll keep adding more to this as we get more rules. All right, so to test that it throws given a 0 total amount, we will say with test values dot with total amount 0, and we expect an invalid order exception. All right, so that's our assertion. Zovek is asking, is the builder pattern one of the gang of 4 creations? Yes, it's exactly. It's a gang of 4 pattern, and it is a creational pattern. Okay, so now over here, we wrote a test for this, but we haven't actually made it work yet because we aren't throwing in a exception yet. So we're going to copy this, paste it in here, and we'll say if order dot total amount is equal to 0 or greater than 0, so less than or equal to 0. Then we're going to throw a new invalid order exception, order total amount must be greater than 0. And now, magically, it still blows up. Why is it still blowing up? Doink, doink, doink. What do you see? Did I do it the wrong way? Less than or equal. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, perfect. Good. Thank you. I was like, less than minus. It's just an arrow. What are you doing? All right, so that works. So let's do another quick commit. Add total amount. Check. Commit that, and we can get rid of this to do. All right. Then we say, well, the order must have a customer. Customer must not be null. So let's bring this back over and copy paste. Throws exception given order with. We'll say no associated customer, and I expect this to be valid except for the fact that it's lacking a customer. So with customer null build. All right, invalid order exception, blah blah blah. Let's generate this thing now, and so now we have a method, and we can come over here and go track down wherever it put that and put it where we actually want it, which will be, let's say, alphabetically here. And because we have no encapsulation, it makes this easy because it's, the point equals that. Don't help me out. And this will just be customer like that. And this should be order builder. And this should return this. Not his, this. Okay, so at that point, this thing is still not happy. And this is not working because we haven't implemented it yet, is why. So we come back over here, and we have to implement it. So we're going to take this. And you could actually use guard clauses for these things if you want. I haven't tied that in as well, but you really could. Trullian is saying, would I place validation in the order service in a real app? No, this thing is totally violating single responsibility principle. This is doing way too much stuff inside one app. Like this method is kind of okay, that it's just doing these 3 steps. And maybe that could be like a template method on a I order service or something, and and these things are each like being passed in as different services that it calls out to through dependency injection or something like that. But as it stands now, and as you'll see as we go through this, it's going to have way too much logic in one place. This is purely meant to focus you on how to work with the builder pattern and add methods to it and run into some roadblocks that you will commonly see so that you can know how to go about getting past them, which we're about to see the first one in a second. Okay, so order must have a customer. Customer is not null. If order dot customer is null, throw new exception, order must have an associated customer. There. Alright, look at that, everything's green. That means I can get rid of that to do. And we can save and we can do another commit. So this will be the add customer not null check. And we'll push those out. And then just so we can see what whatchamacallit, Git history looks like, here's this. Let's refresh it. And now you can see, as we step through this, here's where we started. We had this order service place order set of tests, and then we added a happy path test, which is there at the top, and then we added another one now that says total amount check, and you can see that's the one that's kind of bright there where it's obvious what was done. And then, in this case it's pretty easy because I'm just adding. At some point, if I refactor this, you'll see all the changes all throughout, right? But it's a nice way to just quickly step through and see what changed with something. And you can do that again with the system under test, the service as well if you want. Okay, so now we just move on to the next to do, and that brings us down into the customer validation step. Now that's called from here. So the main method doesn't say validate the customer, but in the process of validating the order, the last thing it does is validate the customer. And the instructions say throw an invalid customer exception, unless otherwise noted, and create a customer builder to implement this. So this is where we have to do a little bit more of the work ourselves. But we're still just going to write all these tests inside the same test class, just to limit how many different places we have to add code, and because it makes it easy to go and look at that in Git history. All right, and the first rule is that customer must have an ID greater than 0. So let's create that test. Come over here. And now we can say throws exception given order with, what is it? Customer must have an ID greater than 0. Yeah. Customer with ID 0. Okay. So at this point, we need a customer builder, right? Because this needs to pass in a customer. And that customer needs to come from somewhere. So we'll say var customer equals customer builder dot build, and we already know it's going to be something like dot with ID 0 dot build. And because I'm kind of using this with test values pattern, let's just throw that in there too, like that. And then we're going to look for an invalid customer exception now when we run this thing. And we could be checking for the exception stuff as well. Hey, Snowfrog. Yeah, this is a coding kata I've got. You can find it. I added a link to it at the start of this, but you probably can't find that anymore. But it's all linked to from here. So there you go. I got a late start, so I just figured I'd do a kata because why not? And I've been meaning to update this one anyway. Alright, so the customer builder we need to build, right? We need to build the builder. So we'll come over here and just create a new class. Public class customer builder. And it's going to need things like with ID. So we can steal this right here and stick it up here. And I'll say with ID, and it's going to need a build method that's going to return a customer, not an order, but we'll get to that. And it's going to need a with test values, because why not? So we'll just steal those from that other one there. And then we'll change these around. Alright, so let's start by trying to do it the same way as order. Now this is not going to work, but it's good for you to see why it's not going to work. Alright, so let's take this and put it in its own file. And now we have to go find it again, right here. There's our customer builder. And we need to change all this to be order stuff. So customer builder, customer builder, customer builder, and this becomes customer, and so does that, so does that, and then lastly we just need this to be underscore customer, rename it, look at all the things. Okay, you don't have a total amount, we'll get rid of that, and we'll get rid of that to do. Alright, so here is the problem. I can't create a customer because the customer has a required argument. So let's look at the order builder for a second and talk about this for a moment. When you use the builder pattern, what's supposed to happen is you configure a bunch of things and then you say build, and when you build, it builds the thing right here. Okay? Now that's not what we're doing with the order builder. We're kind of cheating. And the reason we're cheating is because we can get away with it, and there's not a whole lot of downside in this scenario, so it's sort of a shortcut. The way we're cheating is we're creating the order as soon as we create the builder. Now, as long as you don't reuse your builder ever, this works fine, right? And so in a unit test situation where, the builder is created for every test and you use it exactly one time, that all works fine. But if you had, if you tried to use this builder more than once, the order that you configured the first time would still have, that instance would still be the same instance you were trying to configure the second time, and that could cause you problems. The other issue here is that I'm able to create this because it has a default parameterless constructor. Customer doesn't have that. So I have to do it the right way with customer. Give me a sec. All right, that's better. So with customer, what we need to do, we can't actually create it here, right? We have to build it in the build method. So we'll say return new customer, right? Now what does this thing need? It needs an ID. So we're going to pass it in an ID, and up here we're going to say private int underscore ID, and instead of setting the ID when we do this, we're going to set our private field, and that's going to work fine. Now when you say with test values, that's going to do the same thing. It's going to say underscore ID equals 0. And then when you do all these things and then you create the customer, it's going to be created with that ID. Number of streamers who turn their head to cough with a head-mounted mic. Yeah, that would be, that's not very bright. Okay, so this all builds now, right? And I should be able to go back into the other method, order builder, here. And for whatever reason, that's not, oh, I didn't instantiate it up here. Here's why. So let's create another private read-only. Target type is not available in C# 7.3. Why am I using C# 7.3? What the heck? Did I? What is the thing? Oh, I don't want to mess with this right now. Okay, so that's something else I need to do. I need to upgrade this thing to .NET 5 so I can use new features. Okay. Somebody go add an issue for me to do that on the repo here. Builder test sample issue upgrade to .NET 5. Thank you. Alright. We'll see if bossing people around on my stream actually works. Now, over here, why is this still not working? I think because we didn't implement it yet. So I'm expecting an invalid customer exception. That's not actually a thing that's been implemented anywhere. So the test looks good. But here we need to actually throw it for this. So we're going to say if order.customer, oh, it's getting a customer in. If customer dot ID equals 0, then throw new invalid customer exception. Customer ID must be greater than 0. There we go. And now that should turn green, and it does. So that means I can get rid of that to do, and we can go back to our Git changes, and we could say we added customer builder and first verification. Okay, so that's that. Now, next one, customer must have an address, meaning it's not null. So we'll come back over here, we'll write a test for that. So create this, and do that correctly. Okay, and SurlyDev says it worked. Thank you. For sending a small note to the viewers in the current approach, the order in which you call the builder methods matters, right? Exactly. Yep, I touched on that earlier. So for people who are just showing up later, you have to remember to do this first. Which, I mean, it makes sense, because anytime you say with, you're setting things. So when you say with test values, it's going to set all the values. Now there's 3 issues for update to .NET 5. Alright, well, I'll also take pull requests. So, whoever wants to be the first with the pull request, you can clear out 3 issues. Throw exception, give it order with customer with null address. Null address. There we go. Customer with this with ID. We don't need that anymore, but we do need dot with address of null, right? And let's go over to the customer builder with ID. Address will be before that. Public customer builder with address. address, address, underscore address equals address, return this, and control dot this. And the reason I'm relatively fast at this is because I've done this kata a few times. So the reason why you do katas is so you can get faster at knowing how to do these patterns without having to spend a lot of time wondering how to do it. And in this case, it's working out for me, or so it seems. There's that right there. And so that should work. With test values, eventually I want this to actually have an address, but we're not there yet. So what's left? I gotta actually throw the exception. Let's see, come back to here. With give this, you should give me that. Oh, I need to set an ID with my test values. That's what I need to do. So here, this should actually have a valid value, so that this works. Now, if I want to verify this, what I usually like to do is in the builder, I'll say private const int test customer ID, give me an underscore, equals whatever, right? 1, 2, 3. And then this is a good spot to use test customer ID. And then in my happy path that we were doing over here, order creates, okay, with test values, with ID, we could do an assertion at some point and say assert.equal order.customer, or actually customer builder dot test. Where are you? Your private const. No, public const. Okay, so over here we'd want to be able to get to that and say dot test customer ID, comma order dot customer dot ID. Okay, now that's not going to work yet, and I'm kind of going off the reservation there, doing that early, but I'll show you. All right, so let's read some of these things here. John Aldrin, I just did the kata last week and see how the solution matches. Cool. All right. What extension are you using to put this in the green check marks? That's the built-in live unit testing that Visual Studio has. It's very much like nCrunch. It's only available on certain versions of Visual Studio. And we also say, or who knows, happens to have a good example under GitHub, you can copy and paste. I'm sure that's a comment on something I said, probably about the patterns. Simon Gearing, thinking about it, I should have clipped it and put the clip reference in the issue text. There you go. Okay, so this isn't going to work just yet, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's focus back on here. When I give it a customer with an address that's null, I expect it to throw an invalid customer exception. So let's go make that work and get that test to pass. So that's right here. If customer dot address, home address, is null, then throw new invalid customer exception. Customer address cannot be null, or must be set, or whatever. Now that's green. All right. Now, is that other test passing yet? It's not. So while we're here, let's make this one pass as well. So how do we do that? Well, in the test values for Order Builder, we're not currently wiring up a valid customer. So let's go look at Order Builder. And there's a to-do here that tells us we need to do this. So replace the next few lines with CustomerBuilder that I create. For now, we would do just these 2 lines, and they will work if I give that a value. Kinda, not really. Test still fails. Why is that test failing? Home address is set, covered by 6 tests. Well, let's run these tests. Run them all. What did we miss? If you want live unit testing on the cheap, there's an extension called Whack Whack Terminal that embeds terminal in a VS window, and you can do .NET Watch Test in there. Yeah, and I do that in VS Code. I'll do .NET Watch Test all the time. All right, so creates order. Of course, that's the one that's failing, but why is it failing? Let's just debug it and see. The order has an ID of 0, like it should. Test value should give it an amount. The with ID I don't need. Assert not null is going to work, so that's fine. And then I'm expecting that my test customer ID, oh, that's why, because I set it to 1. like a fool. All right, so it's expecting us to be 1, 2, 3, and actually it's 1, obviously. All right, so all I need to do where it said to do this to do is exactly what it says. All right, so we'll just say order.customer equals new customer builder dot build. We'll say dot with test values dot build. All right, so by default, when you create an order with test values, you get a customer with test values. And then get rid of these things, and everything's happy. Okay? So in our Git changes, what did we do? We added a customer, what were we verifying? That the address must have an address. So checked that customer has a valid address, I think was pretty much it. All right. Now let's go back over here. We can get rid of that to do and say the customer must have a first and last name. Right, so we can do the test first, or we can do the implementation here. Let's do the test first. So we come back to our tests. We come down here. We're going to add another one that says customer has a first and last name, and I don't remember if customer has first and yeah, it does. All right, so we'll do both of those. If those exceptions good, order with customer with empty first or last name. And for this one, we'll take in some parameters: string first name, string last name, and we'll show off how to do a theory and some inline data. And we'll say Steve, nothing, Smith, and do the same with null, and do the same with null, and we may as well do null, and string empty, and that'll be a whole bunch of test cases to verify all the ways I think that we could screw this up. So we're going to say customer builder with test values with first name of first name and with last name of last name. Okay, and so that's our test. Now these don't exist yet, but we're expecting to get an invalid customer exception. Simon Gearing says, doesn't the latest VS support a terminal window natively? Yeah, it does. So I don't know if that's if that would do the trick. Maybe it would. Thanks for the follow, Droppy77. All right, let's go out to Customer Builder and we'll add with first name with last name. So alphabetically, that's going to go kind of here, and first name, string, first name, and first name. That's that, and we'll do the same with last name. Generate a field. There they are, and use them down here. Does that look good? I didn't think it was an embedded tool window, just launches the terminal. Oh, okay, they're talking about that. This all looks fine. So then in our test, we set those things. We're expecting it to throw an exception, and somehow it is throwing an invalid customer exception. So why would it be throwing an invalid customer exception when I haven't implemented that inside the validate method yet? So that's our question. So this with test values gives us a customer. This one overrides it with our guy here. We set the first and last name to be whatever these are. Oh, and it doesn't blow up because I haven't told it to yet. So why is this still working? it must be that I didn't implement something here, which was address. So address is still null. That's our problem. So I need to give it an address in its test values that has a value. So in CustomerBuilder, when we create all this, we also need to give it an address. And we'll just say here var address equals new address for now, and we'll set that right here. Address equals address, and it's home address. There we go. Oh, it's already set right there. All right, fine. Yeah, so where's that coming from? With address. I didn't set it. There. Okay. Gotcha. So where's my test values? In test values here, we'll say underscore address equals new address. And I should probably name this home address so it matches. But now everything just lit up red. And that's because all my tests are green except for this one, which is the one I expect to be red. And the reason is that I haven't implemented yet. So if we come over here, now we're ready to implement it. We'll say if string dot is null or empty customer dot first name, then throw new invalid customer exception, customer first name is required, like that. And that should get rid of half my errors. And we won't see that with live unit testing, but if we do it here, it should show it. Lobito TV, yes. The link for it is basically this builder test sample GitHub repo. So if you hit the link in the chat, or just Google for Ardalis builder test, there's an article here that talks about it. It has a link toward the bottom to the Kata itself, right, and this update from 2018. That's a good place to go look. And I also have a list of katas in a Kata Catalog on GitHub. So if you do Ardalis Kata Catalog, it'll show up. And the builder one is right here. So any of those will get you there. Okay, so that worked, and now you can see which ones of the inline data didn't work, right? And it's going to be the ones that have to do with last name, because we haven't done the last name check yet, right? So expected, exception, blah, blah, blah. And we could go in and see, exactly which one that was. All right, so let's go back to the order service and drag this over here again. And we're just going to duplicate this, but now use last name. And I am expecting that is going to fix things. Last name. Boom. Okay, so now I can get rid of that to do. But now let's refactor slightly, okay, because I did something I shouldn't have done over here in CustomerBuilder. And that was where I just newed up this address and set it. That really needs to be the address builder. Do I need to do that yet? I guess we won't do that until it tells us we need to do it. So we're going to say we're good for now. So what did we just check? We checked first and last name. So verify customer first and last name are set. There. And we'll push a few more commits out. Last name exception test still says first name. Alright, well that passes, because my test isn't very smart. So if I wanted to write a test to verify the correct exception, I would do that. But we'll just do it there for expediency's sake. Alright, customer must have a credit rating greater than 200, otherwise throw a different insufficient credit exception. Okay, so let's come back over here, go to our tests, write another test. Let's copy from this one, because I don't think I need a theory for this. Throws exception given order with customer with credit rating under 200. And actually, I think I will use a theory for this. Int rating, because it's just too easy to check edge cases with that. So theory and inline data, if it's 0, it should definitely blow up. Let's say if it's 100, it should still blow up. And if it's 199, it should blow up, I think. Alright, so with test values, without setting the address to null, but with credit rating of rating, we expect to get a different exception now. We expect to get a, I don't remember, insufficient funds, insufficient credit. And I don't know if I've set that up yet as a type. I think I have, but a different exception now. There we go. And so we go to CustomerBuilder to create that. So we can just do control dot generate a method. And really the generated method is not all that helpful because none of the things about it are correct. But it still gives us a placeholder. All right, so we'll put it in the right place because that was wrong. We'll make it public because that was wrong. Because you might want to put this in a different package at some point and still have it work. Well, it doesn't want to return an object. It's returning a CustomerBuilder. That's the name. They got that right. The int I think is right. So okay, it's slightly helpful. But here we want to create a credit rating equals rating, and then we want to return this, and we're going to control dot all the things to give us that, and we're going to come down here and we're going to wonder why this is still here. I thought I cut it. That's not going to bite me at all later, I'm sure. And then here this is going to say credit rating equals underscore credit rating, like that. Now credit rating is going to start at 0, so if we want anything to work with that, once we add this thing, we're going to have to put it in with test values also. Joe Rosegard, would it make sense to look for default null in build and then remove the with test values? Guess could shorten your test methods a bit. Well, what you could do, and maybe I'll do this at the end. I actually only have about 15 minutes. Maybe I'll do it sooner. You don't have to use with test values, and so a lot of folks will use a constructor for that. So maybe I'll just show what that looks like, and it does clean things up a bit. I do think it's still handy to have some helper methods where you can say with a certain type of value, and not have to do a whole bunch of things one by one. It's no different than in the builders that you have in .NET Core when you're setting up, ASP.NET Core. You can just say something like with default configuration or with default host builder, right? Like those are shortcuts to do a whole lot of stuff with one method. And that's what this is meant to do. It's meant to like consolidate a bunch of work for you. But if you always are calling the same one, then it's not really that helpful. So I'll show you how to make that a constructor in a second. Okay, so let's see, I obviously don't need that anymore. Let's get that out of there. And where we are, credit rating, right? Not implemented yet. So we need to actually create the exception over here. We'll say if customer.creditRating is less than or equal to 200, then throw new insufficient credit exception, not a good enough credit rating, and call that good. Okay, so that one is actually, well, that one's green, but a lot of other things are not green. So what is not green? This test does not pass, even though we just wrote the thing that should make it pass. So 0 should work, 100 should work, 199 should work. Probably it's the same problem I had last time, which is that I have a previous exception that's catching me. So let's just run everything and see what we get. So in here, throw. It's the wrong type. It says it's an invalid customer when it was expecting a different one, right? Now why is it an invalid customer? I've seen override for the default operator, have it called build for you, allowing you to pass the builder as a parameter and have it magically become the instance being built. Yeah, I could see that. That's a little bit magic, but it would work. Okay, so what's happening here is this is blowing up probably because the with test values is giving an invalid customer before we even get to the other thing. So if I can see what the exception is, that would be nice. And so let's do a little bit of changing here to make this easier to debug and show you what that looks like. So you can do stuff like this. You can say action equals, and then you can paste or copy this thing out of there and put it here. Now this doesn't really help me with debugging yet, but then in here I can use the action, and this just needs to have a namespace. Okay. Now what that does is it lets you follow more of a range, and then down here you can say this is my act, and then this is my assert. Right, but then you can also take that a step further here. You can say var exception equals that, and we could further do things like assert dot equal some message, exception dot message. right? Now, obviously that's not going to pass, but I do want to get this exception so I can look at it real quick. So we're going to just throw that right there, and all of those fail. So I can just do this and debug, and the first one I hit will do it. And this assertion is going to fail, but hopefully it gives me my exception when it fails. So yeah, it says throw new. That's it. Okay, so yeah, it's because I didn't set the name, right? So these ones I just did, I didn't update with test values to give it a valid name, and so that's why it's blowing up. All right, so that makes sense. For some reason, it throws me every time. So I obviously need to practice this kata more so I get used to this more. But in CustomerBuilder, when we say with test values, that now needs to include a valid first and last name. So we would have to come in here and say first name equals, first, and last name equals last. And I would move these up into constants, just like I did with this, right? There'd be a test customer first name, test customer last name. In the interest of speed, I'm going to skip that. And now that will bring us to here, and we're still failing. And then I don't really need that either because it's going to fail. I'm just showing you how you can pull the exception off. Oh, and that's why it was failing. There you go. Okay, so we're all good now, and that means that we can get rid of a to-do. So must have credit rating. That's functional. And then the thing to remember that I keep forgetting is to come into CustomerBuilder and give it a credit rating right here. So I can say rating equal, and sure, let's do a test customer credit rating there, and we'll give it another const int of, I don't know, 400. Okay, test customer. You didn't copy what I wanted to copy. That goes there. Perfect. Okay, so what did we change now? We added check for credit rating. Okay. Let's do the constructor change while we're here. So we'll just do it for customer. We don't have to be consistent necessarily. And so what we can do is we can come in here and we can say, we're not going to use with test values anymore because that's tiresome. So we're going to say constructor, CustomerBuilder, and we're going to take everything in here and just copy it and paste it in here in our constructor. And then we're going to get rid of with test values completely. And that's going to break a few things. We'll come over here, and we just don't need these anymore, is the theory, right? If we did this right. So we can get rid of CustomerBuilder with test values everywhere. And it just defaults to having test values now. And everything's green again, right? So that was an easy refactor. Move customer test values to CustomerBuilder constructor. All right, and we'll push that up. Nobody has any questions. We still got a few minutes left. Let's keep going. I like that refactoring. I think I might just do that by default in the future. Customer must have total purchases greater than or equal to 0. So that's fine. We'll come over here and greater than or equal to 0. I'm pretty sure I don't need a fact for that. So we'll do this. We'll paste here. Get rid of my comments. Make it a fact. That's a fact. Throws exception given order with customer with no purchases. And I don't need any parameter. Customer with purchases 0. I don't know what purchases is. What is purchases? That's a total purchases. Here with total purchases, it's just a dollar value. So we'll say 0M to make it a decimal. And if that's the case, it becomes an invalid what? It doesn't say. So if it doesn't say, then we default to invalid customer exception. And that's here, invalid customer exception. All right. Okay, so with total purchases, we'll just come to the CustomerBuilder. With all the things, we'll copy this one. We'll say with total purchases, decimal, total purchases, purchases, like that, and everything's happy. We do want it to have some number here as well, so we'll give it something like that, and say public const decimal test customer total purchases equal something like that, and then this becomes that. Alright, now I'm not actually asserting on those anywhere, so they're not really that helpful, but you could, right? Down here when I'm exerting, usually on the happy path, like on the happy path up here, way up here, I can do a check now that says assert dot equal CustomerBuilder dot that's not CustomerBuilder, CustomerBuilder there dot test total purchases order dot customer dot total purchases, and that should work, and I think it still does. All right. Okay, so this test here says set total purchases to that, and it should throw that. And we haven't implemented that yet, so why are we getting this? Why is this still working? Did I forget again to do the thing? What was the last thing I did? Credit rating. But I thought I did that. I thought I came in here and I said credit rating equals that, so it should have a valid credit rating now. It says none of those are passing now. Oh, there's also the fact that I'm not compiling. That's a problem. CustomerBuilder does not contain with test. Ah, alright. That is a problem. Bam. Alright, that's better. Apparently, live unit testing just lies to you when your build is failing and says, yeah, everything's green. Alright, so now everything broke. We broke the world. Let's figure out what still works. And it's really just two things are broken. Alright? And so assert equal 1, 2, 3, create order. Okay, so that's not set yet. That's fine. And this one says given order customer with no purchase. Okay, so that's the ones I'm doing right now. That's fine. That's what I expect. I haven't implemented it yet. So the assertion on order for it to be 1, 2, 3 is because in order builder with test values, when I create a customer and I build it, that's supposed to give me a customer that's been built and it would have that 1, 2, 3 on it. So that, why are you gray? Because you're set right there. Oh, you know why? Because nothing actually reads you. Because you didn't do that. Total purchase equals, there we go. I know how to write code. Now that fixes one error. I hope, right? So this is green now. That's good. All right, and the other one I have to actually write the code for. So we'll come over here, and we'll just say another one of these guys. And we'll say if customer dot total purchases less than or equal to 0, throw a new thing. Customer must have some purchases, and everything should turn green. Maybe, if I can get my parentheses right. Woohoo! All right, and it's 4:58. We still have a little bit of time left. There's still a bit left to this kata, and it basically is going to teach you how to do the address builder and some other things. But hopefully you're getting the gist at this point. I mean, it kind of drives home how to create each one of these things and what the common problems are that you run into as you work with it. Everything's green. I guess I just need to commit. And so customer purchases must be greater than 0. There we go. Push that up. Does anybody have any questions about this? I think I do like the constructor better. Let's see what happens if I swap out the order one with that. So this one should be really trivial. We do a ctor here. There's really nothing to do in this one, is there? I guess these three things need to happen. So cut them from there, paste them there, get rid of with test values. And maybe I'll change the default template for this thing to get rid of that with test values when I do the other updates. Everything's green. So how can that be? You can't even be building now. Yeah. Live unit testing really shouldn't show me everything being green. That's a bug. I guess I can't tell the difference between code not compiling and code not passing tests. Alright, so literally every one of these needs updated. Just to remove that. But that means all my tests just get a little shorter, which I always like. And that's better. I like that better. Alright, everything is green again, so let's commit that. Remove with test values from order builder. Bam. Paste. Alright, it is now 5 o'clock, and I have things I gotta go attend to, so I don't usually have anybody that is doing .NET stuff on Friday nights that I can send you to from like live coders. Let's see, who am I following on Twitch? Anybody have anybody that we should raid? I'm open to suggestions.
First let me do it.
Oh, quiet.
Yeah. Hey.
Quiet Twitch. Anybody? At first I was like, how are you guys talking to me? Joe Risgard says, yes, I like the constructor instead of with test values. Not really obvious what it set up. Thank you. I agree. I think that's better. And if none of you have added a issue for that yet here, update, right? And convert to use NRTs, that would be good. Let's do one more here that says update default starter code to use constructor instead of with test values. And one of you can do that as a pull request if you want, otherwise I'll take care of it. Okay. There's nobody doing tech stuff, at least not with .NET that I can see right now. Visual Studio is about to go live. Is it? Is it? Let's just see about that. Yeah, that happened last week too. They start late, so I was like, right as I was getting ready to be done, they were starting. Let's throw this. Is Mads doing something again? All right. I don't think I can raid him when he's not started yet, can I? I guess there's 14 people there already. Let's try it. Let's try it. So if I go to, let's see, I'll do it down here in my other screen. If we go to Twitch TV, blah blah blah, and I go to my stream, which I can never find. He starts streaming but not yet live. Right. So I should be able to raid him. So let's go raid him and check out his Visual Studio extensions. He's like the man when it comes to Visual Studio extensions. Creator dashboard, I think, and raid channel, and pick a channel, Visual Studio. There we go. So I'm going to start the raid, and I could use bang raid. Let's try that. I never used the keyboard commands. Bang raid Visual Studio. Let's see if that works. Alright, so if this works, I'll jump over there and say hi there for a minute, and otherwise, have a nice weekend. I'll see you later. Thanks for joining. Hey, and he just went live. So raid. Yeah, that didn't work. We'll do the raid the way I usually do it. And over here in my window it says people are ready to raid, and we're going to do it in 2, 1, now. Bam.